meeting of Franklin Tourism Commission. And start by taking roll call. Jeff Kadursky. Here. Bill Elliott. Excused. Barbara Wessner.
Here.
Mark Wiley.
Here.
All right. Now please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. It is 6:03, and the next item on our agenda is the citizen comment period. And not seeing any, well, seeing one citizen, but maybe waiting, who has comments for later. I will close the citizen comment period and move on to item number 3 on our agenda, and that would be the approval of our meeting minutes from the June 18th Tourism Commission meeting. A copy of those minutes is in your packet. Any comments on the meeting, on the minutes as presented?
Motion to approve as written.
I will second.
Approve. Second by Barbara. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Reports. Starting tonight with Engage Franklin.
So let me just say a couple things up front, and then I'll turn it over to Laura. We did have a board meeting on Monday, and Laura unfortunately could not be there, and we have not had a chance to catch up too much, but there's a lot of good things that are happening. EY Sports has booked 4 different weekends with us, and we'll probably have in excess of 500 rooms.
Each booking or a total?
I think each booking. I may be wrong about that. I thought it was each booking.
I get it. It wasn't like on peak 500, for a weekend, but over the duration of 500 nights.
So, and what they've given us a contract that we are reviewing, and the only terms that they wanted was a $4.50 reduction in the room rate for each night that they book, which both the hoteliers that are on Engage Franklin thought, hey, that's a great thing, we can do it. And they'll book all the hotel rooms with the hotels directly. So it sounds like it's a good thing. So those are booked October 25th, 26th, 1, November 15th and 16th for the 2nd, December 20th and 21st for the 3rd, and then February 14th and 15th for the 4th. Those will all happen at Mosh. So,
weekends, driving some business in the car.
yeah, and that's the emphasis that Brandon has been looking at for right now is essentially basketball tournaments in the winter, fill the room.
Perfect.
The Root River Classic is moving on. She's taking applications to sign up. It's an aggressive thing. It's going to be an all Wisconsin thing. It's going to be nice. So aside from that, I'll ask Laura to step up.
Sure. So all the updates. So in general, I feel like we're doing good. Right? We have a lot of opportunities in the hopper, some of which came from CTA Symposium, some of which Brandon is just prospecting on his own, which is a strong initiative to do. Every meeting, he's coming forth with here's a new one, here's a new site visit coming in, here's a new perspective business, and the biggest challenge we have is keeping up with number one, pulling his reins a little bit and be like, whoa, we got to talk finances. A lot of these events cost money, right? So we can't keep that. We can't steamroll, to the end of the process. We really have to do our due diligence. Not a bad problem to have with him. I think he finds a business, excited about the business, and he wants to jump from A to C sometimes, But that's okay. That's why boards exist. So I've been happy to have the conversations with him on our one-on-ones about what financially it looks like, how to negotiate those types of things with rights holders. And a lot of the ones that we're garnering are kind of grassroots. So the negotiation isn't like they've dug their heels in and that's how they always do it. That means if they'd like to dip their toe in the pond of Franklin, that, usually they're willing to do so at, like, if their RFP says that they require 30,000, they're usually willing to work out some version of something that would work for our market, right, as like a regional or sports. But obviously that's been the main focus, is acquisition of the sports market. That's kind of our bread and butter. I have really encouraged Brandon to continue to access the Milwaukee County Sports Complex calendar as well. It's easy to lean into Mosh because they're right there to negotiate. It's a little harder to get in touch with the staff at Milwaukee County Sports Complex because of how the business makes sense. But we do have access to that calendar. And for example, I inquired about that for these basketball tournaments coming in. Just like, hey, do we need more courts? How do we diversify? Those types of things. And of course, they, instead of existing courts, they have to bring in the courts, so additional costs. And I just didn't want this group to think that we are immediately leaning into Mosh for all of our indoor sports type acquisition. I'm always that chirp in the ear saying, have we checked this? Have we checked this? So still mindful of that frankly. On the topic of the visitor's guide, the last time I was in this room, there were questions and there were different things across the table about which are represented. I haven't had the opportunity. I don't know if Brandon brought a copy of the.
He did bring a copy, and we did look at that.
Okay.
One of the concerns that came up was we don't want to see the visitor's guide turn into a Chamber of Commerce thing. So it's things that visitors that are here might look for. Give me a restaurant where I can go and get ribs. Give me whatever. And he did have your input, including things like Restore and Salvation Army. And we did decide not to put that in because that would be another 4 pages. We'd have to do four more pages in printing it. So.
I can talk with him in our next one-on-one about if it's a spacing issue. There's plenty of. I can work with him on figuring out spatially how it could work. I feel like in the if we approve it and that's what we want in there, I can help him make stuff fit because there is plenty of white space, like color space, to work with. But it's a matter of making sense. And I know that he doesn't want to dive into a whole design project without knowing exactly, that what he's doing is right. So,
yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of
Has
course.
Brandon had design background?
Mhm.
He has.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, his wife owns a graphic design business.
Okay.
So we've gotten this like bargain in that sense where she's lent a hand, and that sort of thing. So, and in the long run, the ideal situation is to outsource, right? We want to have our staff working on, working on core mission related items, such as acquiring business, negotiating, being the face of the community, those types of things. So when we do branch out into that, we would love to have, to get 5 bids and source that puppy out once we have, the ability to do so. And we can talk a little bit more about like human resources and that sort of thing when we bid into things later. But this shifts slightly. I did hear back from Bill Geist. I didn't want you guys to think I was pumping the brakes on Bill Geist is a effective facilitator for the conversation that we've been talking about, right? And he's a go. He'd love to come and do it. He's out of Madison, so travel costs aren't, exorbitant or anything like that. So negotiating pricing on that to see that, because what he had proposed originally was a 2-day thing, and I was like, nobody has time for a 2-day conversation. And quite frankly, we want to expedite and drill down, right? It's less of a discovery moment and more of a let's have a quality conversation. So I've had that information back into his lab, and I know that we're going to go back and forth a couple other times before we narrow down something that works. Bill Geist is he owns a business called DMO Pros with a Z. He's been in the business for a very long time and was recommended to me. I've actually sat in sessions with his back when I was the director up in Wisconsin a couple of times because he facilitated for Destination Wisconsin back when they were Wisconsin CBB or whatever it was, Association of CBBs. It was great. He's been in the business forever, and and he was recommended by Sarah Brish, who's heading up the tourism department of group travel. So he comes highly recommended. And I think we'll be able to swing it financially to get him here, and I feel like he's great. So I appreciate it. While I sorted that out, he started a conversation. I had to kind of get. I'm happy to entertain questions. I know a lot of the report is, events that we're bringing in or activities. I miss. I don't have that much, but I'm happy to entertain other activities or practice.
A question on the finding a moderator for a get-together.
Mhm.
Is your idea then, let's say, talk with Bill and give you dates, or he says, this is when I can do this, and this is what I normally charge for this, then what are you thinking? Or you would come back to this, like come back to a tourism commission meeting and say, here's what we can do,
No, I think your schedules are valuable as anybody else's, more so in this case. So I think what I would end up doing is asking Bill for a handful of dates that would work for him. Go through John I would put a doodle poll together with all the dates and times and things like that. Send it to John so that he could disperse it to you guys and you could.
Will Engage be paying his fee?
And the outcome, just as a refresher, is for us to have a full and transparent understanding of each other outside of one, right? So that we understand everybody's opinions. People are being voiced and documented, right? Obviously, it needs to be documented as well, but in a more direct sense and in a more roundtable setting where it's conversational and being led by someone.
So are we going to be kind of doing updates about almost 3, which is when you update your plans that was done with the facility. Is that part of the process or the purpose of the process, or?
Yeah, I think it's almost like the pre-strategic. That makes sense.
Okay.
Because organizationally, I see Engage Franklin doing a strategic plan at the board level only, but we don't want to do that without having this conversation first, right? To guide our vision, to understand that we are in line with all of the opinions and that we've all conversationally understood one another before. Because any organization, usually if you do a strategic plan, your board's invited. You don't invite all stakeholders. You don't do that sort of thing. So we want to keep to the traditional sense of that. So in advance of that,
stakeholders for strategic.
in my experience with DMO strategic planning at the DMO level for a 501c6 organization, it's always been core board level, and then you guide the decision. But this is that's why we want stakeholders table for this conversation before we end.
Yeah, I just, in economic development, working with nonprofits,
Sure.
I have done it both ways, but typically you have stakeholders there.
Yeah, and at the city level, city level stakeholders are your residents, are your organizations. There are many, right? And obviously we have many as well, but it's a little bit, and for our situation, it is very legislatively guided how we need to do this. So really,
But I'm talking economic development
well,
corporation,
I understand from your perspective.
which is a nonprofit organization.
Sure.
Which is the majority of
Sure. Yeah, I
I
understand.
mean,
We just have different experiences.
All right. Yes, Laura? Okay. Mark?
That's it.
Okay. All right, moving on to, and thank you, by the way. Moving on to unfinished business. In our last meeting, it was brought to our attention that the Nature Center had submitted a grant application. And here's application, I think, yes, it's in our packet. It was introduced at the last meeting. We put it on the agenda for today as unfinished business. And so we can discuss, or should discuss, the application and decide if we're taking some action this evening. Or we need some additional.
Along that line, though, I did introduce this to Engage Franklin Board. Laura had a valid question in terms of, should this be a grant application to Engage Franklin? Should it be a grant application to tourism? Why does it all come to tourism, and then we go to turn to Engage Franklin and look for them to pick it up? And that's part of what we should be resolving in this planning session. But we have an immediate issue in terms of this application.
Absolutely agree. And in fact, it is a byproduct of our budgeting for 2025, where we have actually put together a budget that allocates dollars, or a few dollars, for type of grant application. And so, we have a decision, right? Either accept those applications and dispense funds based on our budget, or consider allocating some funds to Engage Franklin to do this.
One of the things that Laura asked at two board meetings ago was, what other kinds of things come to us with these grant applications? And the one that came to mind was the Croatian Park Surf Project. And that's one that we agreed to, and we said we support that. So that's all I got to say about that. I didn't have any reason why. Well, I know in the origins of the thinking of Engage Franklin, we thought that Engage Franklin would do a number of these small civic type things, as opposed to things that are heads and beds. And that's kind of where we're at.
I agree. Yeah, and I think we all understand the reality of Engage Franklin's situation as a DMO that is recently launched, is putting things together and starting to generate and lay the foundation for generating sources of revenue that are not room tax dollars, and maybe come with some of the requirements of that funding, which would work well for certain grant applications. And so, that's the other reality here, is that
Right.
needs to, that funding source to be there, or at least to be
Needs to be recognized.
recognized, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we're sort of in those early stages, right? So that's why I think we agreed to put this on tonight's agenda, because we could see some benefits to visitation to Franklin in this application, and yet it does fit the definition of the type of application we were hoping would grace the doorstep of Franklin. So, other comments on this application or questions?
I'll just say I think it's a good thing to support. Career Nature Center does a lot of good things. They've been a good partner of ours as well as Engage Franklin. They're a good asset for the community. They don't ask for a lot of stuff.
I'm not. I'd like to, on behalf of the, I know questions for 1,000. In the interim of us figuring this out, Engage Franklin would be happy to commit $500. Because we too see the value in this organization, that we too understand that it's mission adjacent to a point that it's very valuable for tourism. So in the interim, I just want to make sure that you guys understand the value. And
Is that comment coming from is the board taking a certain position on this, or is aware of this, and is
so we have set aside a pocket of money for mission adjacent opportunities, right? So we know that it doesn't as, but we understand that the destination piece. So we set aside a certain amount of money, a small amount of money, but a certain amount of value, and then in that funding pool, we've said that our maximum allotment for donation or sponsorship, these types of things, unless the sponsorship has heads and bets value, that is $500. So that's kind of where we've decided to be until we have this whole conversation mapped out about what it actually looks like. Yeah, I wanted to, so yeah, the board is aware. We've already made that predetermined decision, and it's valuable.
So if we, as a commission, were to approve this at a dollar amount that's not the original request, with some anticipation that funds would be coming from Gage Franklin, we have reasonable assurances that will happen on that end, and so Nature Center, within a reasonable period of time, have the funding they're looking for it. Good, okay. That's good information. Based on that.
I so move that we do contribute, the Tourism Commission, $500 with the understanding that another $500 will come from engagement.
Would it be better for the tourism to commit funding to Gage Franklin for the fund rather than committing to certain specific events that really are not part of beds and heads as our mission as a tourism commission? And say, I would feel more comfortable providing money to Gage Franklin on a monthly basis or need basis to do that rather than specific.
Rather than
I'm not saying it's not a good effort, but I'm afraid that, there's going to be other groups that have events all the time that really we're going to be going into this rabbit hole.
Well, and if we did provide 500 to Engage and have them pay 1,000 to Weir Nature,
Correct.
that cleans the entire transaction up.
That's what I'd rather put the funding towards them to increase the funding to this project, or potential project or whatever, to let them, and it could be more. We could just fund that fund from them. I'd be more supportive of that than specific project.
So we have a motion.
You need a second to discuss.
Right. So let's go there first. So
Okay.
we've got a motion on the table to provide $500 of the 1,000 that Weir Nature Center is requesting in their grant application, with the anticipation or the expectation that the other $500 will come from Engage Franklin. Am I restating that properly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do I hear a second to that? And we will discuss implicit amendment at that time. For a second to that. For that. Okay.
So if there's not a second, then it dies, right?
Then it dies,
Motion
and
dies.
then we can entertain another motion. Before we do that, I would just mention that the idea of how the funding actually takes place is unique, Jeff, and it is consistent with what we're trying to do here. So, would you, Barbara, would you be interested in a motion that takes into account the way the funds will be handled?
Yes, because I have some other things I want to say, so let's get
yeah.
that motion on the table to, let's see.
Or do you have some comments now that you?
I can make some comments right now.
Okay.
Why do we have this tourism grant application online if we're not going to even recognize it? We should just remove it and let people know that, no, they can't ask us for money, they need to ask you. I mean, I think we've gone through this process of putting together this application, and now we're not going to. So anyway, I can kind of understand, Jeff, your point, but then again, I don't know. I'm not sure why we need to do that, because we're already giving, Engage a good, and we have money. I don't know.
I guess my question is that just you said we're going down a hole that we may not be able to get out of because of the fact that, for example, I have an event coming up. I'm going to come for because you're going to give me funding because it's a good feely thing and then it brings people in. Okay, is it bring people to the hotels? Does it really affect our mission? Not directly, does not impact. But Engage Franklin, I mean, that's what I thought the whole idea was creating Engage Franklin, to support them, to support some of these manufacturing fundings. And I think as a commission, we could support them with money or funding to help support some of these events, and that takes us out of the picture of,
Yep.
you know, because part of this document was supposed to be how you put heads in beds, and they even said they won't do that. So, again, now, if a funding comes in, if they were going to do something really 3-day event that really brought lots of people in for stays and stuff, I'd be more supportive of this. But just as an event, a 1-day Sunday event, I have events all the time in our center. I'm not asking for funding because that's just part of our business. But again, I support them. I think it's a good effort. I agree that, but I think it should come from a different funding source, which I would motion that we provide extra funding to Engage Franklin to support this.
Could I ask, for right now, the amount of money that Engage has set aside for these community events is $2,000?
Correct.
That's not a great deal of money.
Well, may I please comment? We're governed by the same laws that you. So, in essence, these dollars aren't supposed to be, which is why we created a very moderate amount in the interest of being welcoming in the community and welcomed by the community for mission adjacent. That's how we're talking about, not our mission. Dollars are legislatively not supposed to be spent on these types of things. However, the organization, the DMO, like Engage Franklin, although we're governed by those things, we can explain it in a sense that it's destination development, but it has to be moderate. So we too, you would never have a grant online as Engage Franklin, a grant application online, because number one, we're not in a financial do that. And number two, we'd be saying no more. Unless we very specifically made particular grants, like Travel Wisconsin, for example, where there are very rigid requirements in order to be. So, as much as I pains me, because these are all wonderful things, we love Franklin. We want it to be a thriving metropolis where people are happy to, you know, to thrive in every way. But we can't do it just like you guys can't. It's not legally how it's done. Much as that really.
So Barbara, you're absolutely correct. We created a, we budgeted for this. We created an application form.
Right.
And in that application process, we did state this is what we're, and the questions are very specific about are you going to generate overnight room stays. We also know that and correct me if I'm wrong in this is your interpretation, one of the advantages of creating or seeing the creation of Engage Franklin is the operational, being able to actually have folks put ideas and funding into action. As a commission, we meet once a month. We're not always able to be as interactive with applicants, grant applicants, and whether, how they receive their funds, if there's logos that have to be moved around, if there's printing that needs to happen. So one advantage, of course, of moving funds to Engage Franklin is just the idea of how well is the grantee being serviced, in receiving these funds. With us, it's more, we approve it and then a check is cut, and that may be the end of it, where Engage Franklin is a little more engaged in the whole process. But the reality is we do have a budget, and we do get these applications, and so in this case, if we are okay with the dollar amount, and it seems like it might make sense to move those funds to Engage Franklin, forward those funds to let them actually service, if you will, the grant application. Unless you see that there is a benefit, and I guess this is maybe an issue too of just what are we trying to accomplish? If the goal is funding for the applicant and the successful, the support in the event, or making sure that we make good on the commitments we've made. If that's the goal, then it would seem like get it in the, make sure that somebody can take care of it. If it's recognition for where the funds are coming from, then I can see where there might be a case for not doing that, just cutting it here. And I guess what's that priority? That one take more priority than the other? Sure.
The application say that their operations facilitate extra nights. It doesn't directly recruit them, that people aren't coming there, they're not coming to town to specifically go there, but because they have attractions for people to go to, it prompts overnights, additional stays, which, as I understand, Tourism 101, it's the second thing we do is try to get extra nights out of the people that come for the
That's the
original event.
potential draw visitors from out of state.
This may not be a way to generate paid overnight stays at hotels in Franklin. Nature Center overall is a marvelous example of urban wilderness and should be this itself, but as an opportunity for visitors to extend their stay.
To extend their stay.
And I agree with that, the fact, but I don't agree with the fact of specific funding for an event. That's my, you specifically want funding for the Cider Fest, which is not going to prevent overnight stays. It does help the center, but now if it was some project they were doing, like beautifying the center with flowers, that might be an opportunity that we. But I says as a specific event, I think it should go to Engage, with the caveat that we may support that additionally.
So if I understand what you're saying, Jeff, is that you would feel more comfortable funding a capital improvement to something.
Right.
come
That would
from
help support tourism.
Which
That
is
would-
what is happening with Croatia.
Right.
Croatia.
You know, if they were building a new welcome center, for example, or a new, and then they wanted us to beautify the front entrance, do something that would help tourism, or some type of electronic thing that would get people here advertising, I'd be more supportive of that, specifically rather than one event, cider festival.
Solid logic.
Personally, I would, and I'm speaking now from a public relations point of view, I talk to people around the city and they have no clue, they don't understand what tourism is, they just think Engage Franklin is still under the control of The Rock. And anyway, there's a lot of misperceptions out there. From a public relations point of view, I'd love to see the Tourism Commission's name as the sponsor instead of Engage at this point, because there is just, I think we need that. We need to know. The article that was in the Franklin newsletter about 2 issues ago, wonderful article, beautifully written. Tourism Commission did not mention that as to the funding of Engage, which was, I thought, really unfortunate, because I think we need to communicate our story better. Anyway, that is my view.
Mark?
I kind of tend to recuse myself because of this, because of my seat on both things.
Some hat theory, yes. Well, can we all agree that, one, we'd like to see the $1,000 get funded? We are not talking about a reduction in the grant application. They will receive $1,000. It really, truly is. Engage has come to the table and said, we do have some funds for this. So it didn't come to us, it came to you using your grant application form, but we would contribute $500.
Now it's just administrative in terms of where the money's coming from, where the checks are coming from, correct? Is that where
Well,
we are?
it truly, 500 is coming out of a budgeted line item that they have, and then 500 come from us going to Engage Franklin so that they can write a check for $1,000.
Like a matching funding.
Right.
Yeah. So when the friends thank their sponsors, who are they thanking?
Engage Franklin into it
Check will come from that.
with the note that they would have to say we're matching
We
the
have
funds.
to
Yeah,
obviously share.
Mm-hmm.
Their name. Just
and Barbara, I think you bring up a good point that is it's a deeper conversation, because I think it goes to the heart of the relationship and what is to be expected down the line and what will happen, because I think we all agree, whoever's name is on it, we want these dollars spent properly, we want to increase visitation to Franklin. That's the overriding goal, right? And somehow let the community also know that these funds are being used in a way that's
And it's not tax dollars. We
Right.
still believe it's tax dollars. Unfortunately.
Paid from outside of the
yeah,
Mm.
right.
Technically, it is tax dollars.
Well, but not
That's,
as
that's,
well.
that's why you've been created, because it's responsibility
But it's not
to
property tax
administer them.
dollars.
Right.
Right, it's not property tax
Right,
dollars.
yeah. I understand.
And based on the city's previous history with this, it used to come out of the two funds.
Yes.
All right. So, where are we at?
So really, all you need to do is change this to say Gage Franklin and tourism. Recognize.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable accommodation, and I tend to see where Jeff's coming from, that we still accomplish, if there's going to be an offer that, again, gets Engage Franklin more involved in these types of requests, which is eventually where we see this going, and it's just a matter of us funding the rest of it and have that check written by Engage Franklin, I could. So, do we have a new motion on the table to handle the funding application request?
I'll make a motion that we understand the need for the funding for the project, but we will match the funding from Engage Franklin that has amount funding for the 500, so it come to equal amount to $1,000.
And I will second that. John will,
All right, so we've got a
Massage that.
first and a second, and maybe that's a great idea, Barbara. John, what is your understanding of what the motion is?
Well,
massage those words.
contributing and matching $500. Yeah, Tourism Commission will send matching $500 from to Engage Franklin for funding of the site
Of the $1,000.
Complete funding of the
for
project.
complete funding of
Because I mean, I
$1,000.
think that would be important to us, if that's what the motion is, that
That's what
it's
the
$1,000
motion
shared. Jeff, is that accurately?
Sounds
Sounds
good.
good.
Okay.
Sounds
And-
good to
And
the
you can
second
second
as
that,
well.
Barbara?
Yes, I
That's
will.
okay. So, any other discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes, funding to Franklin for a shared contribution to the neighborhood. All right,
Question, will
Yes.
they be, will Carly Hintz be notified? Or how do we notify them that it's, money will be coming to them?
I think it would, and I know you had shared, thank you, by the way, shared an
Sure.
email letting her know that it's going to come up for discussion tonight. So it would be good for somebody to get right back to her, I think,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I
So
think
is that okay if Engage Franklin then says, listen,
Sure.
it was approved at the Franklin Tourism Commission. They're going to send us some funding, we're going to match it, and we're sending you a check. Okay. Moving on.
You'll send us an invoice then? Thanks.
Great. And because that's been approved, then as soon as that invoice comes in, get that signed. so
Should
that-
be able to do that. I may need a signature. Not that one.
All right, moving on to item B on the agenda, the investment vision for retained funds. Start with an open discussion. Concerning
one of the things that Brandon asked me to bring up, because he's aware that we have these retained funds we're talking about.
Yeah.
And he said, wow, a great idea would be if we could build I'll call it a sports house that's for basketball. Because to Laura's point, we have to use Mosh for some of the stuff because they're the only facility we have.
Right.
But he tried to get into the high school. He tried to get into the sports center. They don't have basketball striping. Yeah. He said, oh, it's a game house. He said, it'd be great if we had a game house that we could book these tournaments into, that we could sell that. And as I read that, I was like, we have about $400,000. We're not going to build anything for $400,000. And yeah.
His brain's a little.
yeah, so I
you
mean,
know?
he had this. It's a great idea. If we had this field house that we could rent it out to all these people instead of going to Mosh, but we don't have that kind of money. So I wanted to bring that up so I can say, Brandon, I did bring it up.
All right. And we have talked about that under the investment category of uses for those funds. Always seed money that's needed for feasibility studies, get the ball rolling, as John knows. So there could be some.
Yeah.
During an open discussion period.
The only other thing I would say is we have talked about as Tourism Commission, would it be appropriate for us to provide more money to Engage Franklin to help them do some more activity? And I think I said Engage Franklin would welcome that with open arms. If we said, here's a couple $100,000 or here's whatever, and we know that there's accountability from Engage to us. They report back to us. They haven't done it recently because Joey's been gone. Our treasurer is a baseball guy, and so we've got to get together as a committee and figure that out. But they do owe us a report every year, what their activities are and things like that. And it's up to us to say, we like that, we don't like that, we want to see you do more of this, that kind of thing. And so if we were to elect as a commission to send them some of that retained fund, we could stipulate with them, this is what we intend for you to use that for. We want to see reports on a regular basis, which they do report. So that was my only input to that.
We also have, as I said, $50,000 right now between the grant fund and
Right.
marketing. Could be without having, that would be operations in marketing. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you can decide how you want to do it. The reports actually are required. We have to have an annual report, we're supposed to get quarterly.
Right. I don't know if Laura, you wanted, if there's anything you wanted to say about what Engage might use the funds for. I mean, obviously, we've got the things Brandon's chasing, but there's more things that could happen.
Excellent. So, to multiple, really talked about 3 of them really mind. Human resource. Develop support services contracts to make sure that, for example, we're marketing appropriately. Our guide project is on a loop every year. There are no hiccups in different areas of traditional marketing that, here. And then the third would be acquisition and opportunity fund. So many of these events we have to immediately. I mean, Brandon's bringing, a dozen a month to our inboxes. What about this, what about this, what about this? My question is, check the financial section because these events cost money, right? It's just, so, human resources, development, support services, contracting, ensure that the seamless marketing campaign, seamless, et cetera, all that, right? And then we funded my 3 pockets that I think we would deliver most. And of course, we can drill down is with whom or what. What do you mean by human resource support? That. And then with regard to opportunity fund and those types of things, happy to set criteria along with you. You know, in essence, for what qualifies for opportunity, qualifies for an acquisition spend. You know, but
I would think that is probably the main focus. Because we can say opportunity fund, but what does that mean? You have to give these events money to come in. You have to bid on them, and so those are the kinds of things that's the actual uses of the dollars without being generalized. You know, we're talking about, let's just take the whole reserve fund and direct it there. I think you heard from 2 meetings ago, there is interest in seeing capital and systems being part of the mix and not just having it all get dropped into the operation.
But I think Mark's comment is a segue actually, because as we enter into session, the way that those public funds are invested and how they're handled is important. So,
What they get used for specifically.
exactly. So,
I would have one question, and I didn't ask it. Probably is similar to the Weir Center question, but not part of it. Whatever became of the Franklin concerts request?
yeah, so we had a great I certainly did it and explained the situation in a way that made sense. Apologize. Express support, gave a little background as to why the conversation steered in that direction, although it didn't happen gracefully. So understood. We ended up issuing the check, and so
And the amount of the check?
$300. $300. With invited me out to watch. He and I are.
Thank you.
I'd like to just make one comment about the concerts. I've been at the 2 concerts they've held so far. The city does not allow them to put up any signage, thanking sponsors, or anything. So the city has been very difficult to work with. Because I think in one other, I'm not sure how many years ago, we did give them some money as well, and they did have a sign or poster or
banner
whatever,
or something.
and they're not allowed to do that. And that's from the city. So.
No.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other open discussion before we need to go to session? Okay. Start off by reading introduction to our closed session. The Tourism Commission may enter closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 5(1)(e) to deliberate the investing of public funds in relation to business activities of Engage Franklin, a destination marketing for competitive or bargaining reasons, and to re-enter open session, same place thereafter, to act on such matters discussed therein as appropriate.
We need a motion.
I so move.
Barbara moves to enter into closed session. Is there a second?
A second.
Second, Jeff. I don't just go unless there's comment. All those in favor of entering closed session?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are now out of closed session. It is 8:17, and we're on to agenda item 6, new business. New business. I move right. Seeing none, hearing none. Moving on to invoices. You have one invoice? No invoices.
No,
All
there
right.
weren't any receipts in June.
Okay.
And as we talked about earlier, once the Weir Nature Center invoices or Engage Franklin invoices, we'll process that when it arrives. Next meeting. Or third Wednesday in August.
I guess, yeah.
First, so it'd be the 20th, right? Yeah.
For
That's
me.
good, yeah.
Good for me.
All right, August 20th at 6 p.m. Okay. Your motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
And I will second.
Got a motion made to adjourn, second by Barbara. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting adjourned.